Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Wine. This week we will be creating a wash of watercolors for our background for our Paul Klee inspired artwork. So if you don't have watercolors at home, that's okay. This is an optional step. You could skip this video and move on to one of the drawing activities for this week. But if you have watercolors, this is what we're going to do. The first thing you need to do is make sure that you gather all the appropriate materials. You're going to need a nice thick sheet of white paper with your name on the back. You are also going to need watercolor paints, water, a brush, and a napkin or a paper towel. I also like to use newspaper so that it makes cleanup easy and I don't have to worry about spilling on the surface I'm painting on. So let's get started. This week, the technique that we are going to be using is wet on wet. That means we're going to need wet paint on wet paper. So the first thing I like to do is I like to take my brush and I have to decide what two main colors I want to use. So if I'm trying to show the feeling sad, maybe I might want to use some blues and maybe some purples. So I'm just going to put a little bit of water in those colors to start to get them nice and wet. Then the next thing I want to do, once I've put a little color into the watercolors, is I'm going to put water on my paper. So I'm just going to take my brush and I'm going to quickly wet my whole paper. I am careful not to scrub the brush into the paper, and I just keep getting lots of water until most of my paper is nice and wet. Then I'm ready to put the wet paint onto the wet paper. Now for this week, I'm just creating a wash of color. So you might remember from first grade that when we create a wash, it also means lots of water. Water is our key ingredient. So all I want to do this week is I'm just going to take some of the colors and I'm just going to spread them out on my paper. So I get lots of water and I get my first color of blue. I happen to have a paint set with lots of different colors. Then I rinse my brush, check it on my napkin, and I'm going to get some more blue. If it's too dark, remember I get water and then I just spread it around. I don't have to worry just yet about covering all the peekaboos. So now I'm going to come, rinse my brush again, check it on my napkin, get more water, and now I'm going to add some of the purple. So I'm not doing too much blending the colors together. I'm just working quickly to make sure that I have some color all over the paper, going edge to edge. Also notice I'm trying to balance that color by putting a little purple at the top, a little purple at the bottom, a little on the right, a little on the left. I'm going to rinse and I'm going to use one more of the purples. Oh, that's not purple. That's sort of a brownish color. Oops. That's okay. That'll work. Still looks a little sad, and if I blend it in, it'll be just perfect. Now, the fun thing about creating a wash in your background is the last step. So once most of my paper is covered, then I just want to make sure that I spread those colors around a little bit. So I can take my paper, I can lift it up, and let the colors start to spread around. I just want to tilt it from side to side. This will keep the paper from puddling in the middle. So I don't want a river or a lake of color in the middle of my paper. It's also fun because as the paper starts to drip and the colors bleed into each other, they create some interesting designs. I want to make sure that if I spilled any paint on my newspaper, I quickly blot that up before I set my paper back down. And then the last step is I can use my brush just to make sure that I have the colors spread evenly into all the edges. If I notice I have a little river or a little lake of color starting to show, I could even take my napkin and just blot that up a little bit so that the paint doesn't puddle too much in one space. If I notice I have any empty spaces in the middle where there is no paint, then I can use my brush just to spread that around. So once your whole paper is covered with some light, transparent color, that's your wash, then you're all set. Let your paper dry and you'll be ready to move on to the next step next week. I hope you have a wonderful week, and as always, keep on creating.